We spend a lot of time in these briefings talking about Israel's national security, what is happening behind the headlines to really give you a picture of this war and analysis of what's going on. And today I want to give you a little bit of a picture of what happens at IDSF. We very much try to be the thought leaders in Israel on all issues of national security. We try very hard to advance a position of defense superiority, of decisive victory in this war. How do we do that? Well, we have 5 different divisions of IDSF, and all of which come together to build an ecosystem of national defense within our own organization. These 5 different areas are research, media, education, grassroots, and policy. You have met many people from our research department, many of whom come from the Mossad, come from the Shin Bet, come from IDF intelligence, and they come over to our organization. They research everything that is happening in this war, everything relevant to Israel's national security, in order to equip us as an organization, in order to empower the people of Israel to understand what is happening in this war. We have a very robust education program, and very recently, General Avivi was on a briefing talking about the Mechina, the pre-army program that we are building in the Moshav of Tekuma in the Gaza envelope in order to not just impact national security today, but to build the leaders of tomorrow who will advocate in a very decisive, aggressive way for what is needed for Israel's national security. We have a 40,000 member grassroots movement here in Israel that mobilizes in order to take to the streets, in order to commit to initiatives, all strengthening Israel's national security. And of course, we do a lot of policy work, meeting with policymakers, politicians, governments, both here in Israel and abroad, to educate, to guide decisions needed for Israel's safety and security, and really the safety and security of the entire West. And we have definitely spent some time over these briefings pinpointing a number of decisive points wherein people like General Avivi met with the top leadership of this country, and then we saw very clear results soon thereafter. We also are very active in the media, both the media in Israel and abroad. And in order to reach policymakers, in order to educate the public, you need to have a strong media presence. And a strong media presence doesn't just happen, it takes a lot of work. In Israel, we have a big media firm, a PR agency that gets us bookings with TV, with radio, in print, and really works on developing our messaging so that we can really reach Israeli society. And likewise, for the international media, we do the very same thing. And I thought it would be of value today to bring you some words from Avi Hyman, who is our PR expert guiding many of the placements of General Avivi and other senior members of our organization when they appear in the international media. So I had a fascinating conversation with Avi earlier today to try to better understand what he does, how he promotes Israel in the media, how he promotes IDSF values in the media. And we really actually began the conversation with what he personally has done in this war in Israel during his time working for the government.
So I got a call on the 10th of October. I've obviously got 20 years of experience in public relations of all kinds, and I've worked on political campaigns. And my phone rang, and it was one of Netanyahu's inner circle. And he said to me, Avi, have you been called up? I said, no. He said, I'm calling you up. And I went silent. I didn't know what to say. I went and discussed it with my wife. My wife said, go now, or I'll never hear the end of it. Sadly, she's never heard the end of it. After 9 months working in the Prime Minister's office as an Israeli government spokesman, I did 150 interviews myself. I booked over 1,000 interviews for other spokespeople, ministers, and even the Prime Minister. And I was working from the IDF headquarters for those 9 months at the tip of the spear for Israeli communications, Israeli public relations, in the eye of the storm and during an existential war that obviously is ongoing. but that was really the height of the war. Um, and I went on, every station you've heard of and every station you haven't heard of, from CNN to Fox News, BBC, Sky News, you name it. Um, Essentially, I stepped out of the shadows, whereas professionally, for 20 years, I've been booking my clients on TV and getting them into the press. Suddenly, I was up front. And I can tell you that there is nothing that can prepare you for a job like this. No former anything, no former spokesman, no former general, or anyone from the defense establishment has a harder time than an Israeli government spokesman during war. They push us the hardest, and it was a real awakening and experience.
Well, Avi, are there any specific incidents you can share with us that represents how hard you were pushed, what it's like to represent Israel during a war?
So for years, I've trained everyone from generals to CEOs, captains of industry, on how to do interviews, TV interviews. But like I said, nothing can prepare you for the types of tricks and shticks they pull on an Israeli government spokesman during a war. The cards are stacked against you. So the things that I didn't even know I was supposed to prepare for, like turning off your mic mid-interview multiple times, changing the camera so that they're back in the studio when you're still speaking and you think you're still speaking. Just generally interrupting you with a level of, that you don't see anywhere else. And obviously, I watch a lot of TV news for my work, and I train a lot of people, and I've seen thousands of hours of interviews. Nothing can prepare you for it. So, for example, I went on Channel 4, England's Channel 4, and I specifically said, I'm only doing a live interview because, like, a week before, Elon Levy was on there for an interview that I booked, and he did a recorded interview, and they asked him a question, and they cut his answer, and then they made it look like he didn't have an answer. So I was like, I'm only doing live. Well, I did live, and then they pulled a new shtick on me. They just turned off my mic and changed the camera angle, as if, like, again, I hadn't answered it, or they were just going to move on because maybe my answer was too good. So that's just an example. Other examples, would be pushing me in the corner. Piers Morgan, a lot of people saw it, pushed me in the corner on a specific number, the number of casualties, civilian casualties, which he knew I didn't have the authority to give to him at that time. This is just narratives that are pushed out, Hamas narratives pushed out over and over and over. The reality was that he pushed me and asked me that question, maybe 6 times. It felt like a lifetime. A few days later, we were authorized to give out the numbers. We gave out the numbers. Piers Morgan got those numbers. He didn't release them. He kept asking spokespeople the same question as if the numbers didn't exist. We've seen, other institutions pull apart the Hamas health ministry civilian casualty numbers. They are fake. They've always been fake. But that doesn't matter because the cards are stacked against Israel. And again, as a government spokesman, sadly, they always will be.
So I'm curious, when that happens, are they just trying to build up a story? They're looking for ratings. Is there a very specific anti-Israel or anti-Semitic agenda behind it? What is driving that hostility?
I think all of the above. It really depends. I'm not going to start pointing fingers who's an anti-Semite and who's not and things like that. But what I will say is ratings really does matter. This is, from the data that I've seen, the most covered news story in the history of news. So there's been more eyeballs on this war than anything else in history. So, there's the old idiom, Jews are news. If it bleeds, it leads. Now, when we take those two things together, the world is watching. And obviously that can affect us on an operational level too. So it is of vital importance. I think mostly it's ratings. It's, can you keep people watching the TV? And people don't want to hear, nice puff pieces about Israel for whatever reason.
So as you know, you've said you are a veteran of the PR world. How do you think Israel has done on the PR front during this war?
So I can tell you, on a positive note, it's never been better. It has never, in my lifetime, I've never seen Israelis step up on the level that they have, and they are still today. It's never been better. That being said, we have a long, long way to go. I think, sadly, what I've learned since the war started, but I probably knew it before, was that your average Israeli um, doesn't think about Israel's international image, doesn't understand the importance of it. So, as if I was going to give you a historic example, the IDF spokesman's unit, of which I'm a veteran, was founded by a British Ole, an English Jew that made Aliyah to Israel, because he understood the importance of it, right? Now, when you look at the government today, Prime Minister Netanyahu personally understands the importance. That doesn't mean it's at the top of his list. Obviously, he's got a lot on his plate. Ron Dermer understands it. Again, he's got a very full plate, but he understands it because he comes from there. Michael Oren understands it. So I feel that for Israel's public image to be better, people like myself, Anglos, Jews who've made Aliyah from around the world need to step up and say, give us the reins. Like, we get the culture outside of Israel. The message for Israel is not the message for abroad, and the message for England is not the message for America or France, etc. So I see that we've come a long way, and I have great hope for the future. Obviously, first and foremost, operationally, we need to win this war. And thank God, until now, we're doing very, very well. And I hope that continues until total victory.
When you came on board making all of these bookings for IDSF, uh, it significantly upped our game, meaning taking a person who is a professional and really using what you bring from the private sector into promoting Israel is very different than taking a person who was very successful on the battlefield and then transitioned into public policy. I'm wondering if there are more people like you working within the spokesperson's office, within the government, so that that level of professionalism can become more pervasive.
So I think we've discussed this offline in depth, which is that, sadly, what I just said, that the average Israeli doesn't really understand the importance of Israeli public diplomacy. I will never use the term hasbara because that means to explain. We don't need to explain ourselves. We just need to do what every other country on earth does, usually better than us, which is put across our perspective. Now, professionals know how to do that. I know how to do that for high-tech companies, for hotels, for the tourism industry. You name it. I have represented all types of companies in a high-paced, high-octane corporate way. Now, that's the type of people that need to be at the tip of the spear for Israeli public diplomacy. Sadly, that's not the case. For generations, this isn't about this government or another government. For generations, bureaucrats have been given the job, like, kind of as a consolation prize. Like, I know you wanted the finance ministry, but can you just do hasbara for a while? Just explain stuff. But I don't speak English. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Just take the role. We'll get you something else later on. That's kind of been the feeling. And on the inside, behind the scenes, it's been like lifetime bureaucrats that, I don't want to say anything bad, but I will, haven't had a proper job in their life. So they're just kind of playing the bureaucrat game, the long-term bureaucrat game, and that doesn't do the job. So thank God we've had like bright stars like my mentor, Ambassador Mark Regev, who made Aliyah from Australia. He's brilliant. And we've had others like him through generations, but they're few and far between. What we need to do is to build a professional-led, at least professional-led international diplomacy apparatus by which people, if they're full-time or not, that's to be decided, but professionals are leading it. They're building the strategy. They're understanding the strategy for is focused on abroad and not just regurgitating messages from Hebrew. And that will just make everything work better, be more seamless. I mean, we don't lack good communicators in Israel. We can sell the best of the high-tech companies. We can create more unicorns than Europe. But somehow when it comes to actually just putting across our case, just like a regular person talking to a regular person, this is Israel's perspective. Somehow we fall. And because obviously this is IDSF, I can say that, like, we had a joke in the IDF spokesman's unit, not pointing any fingers at anyone in particular, but like the IDF's go-to for so many years has been like, well, you're an intelligence, you're an officer intelligence, or even higher than an officer intelligence. Intelligence, the folk that don't tell anything to anyone, maybe you'd be a good spokesman. After all, you don't speak English. So, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot that can be done from just bringing in professionals and saying what they said to me, which was on October 10th, which is, listen, Avi, like, you know how to get people on TV. I came in not with an apparatus around me. I came in with a laptop, a Rolodex, and the ability to call journalists everywhere from the top down. So I was calling producers and bookers in TV stations. I was also calling high-level executives and saying, listen, I'm representing Israel now, and you are not representing Israel at all. So who are you going to interview from the Israeli government? So you don't get that on a bureaucrat level, which sadly often people are just sitting there waiting for the phone to ring. That's not how public relations is done. You have to make the phone ring.
So, building off of that idea, when you do run these public relations campaigns, is the approach defensive and responsive and explaining hasbara, as you said, or there is this assertive nature, not just to booking an interview, but in terms of the messaging being expressed?
So everything in public relations has to start with strategy. If you're just going, too often I've had clients come to me and say, listen, we can definitely get it in the press if we do this crazy thing. And I'm like, yes, you can. And you'll look like an idiot. You know what I mean? So let's not do that. Let's think about the strategy. Let's think about the messaging. Let's think about your audience and then build out from that. Now, what I just said about a lot of Israeli public diplomacy starting in Israel, what do the Israelis want to hear? What do the Israelis think that people want to hear abroad? No, that's not how it works. You need to think about your audience and focus on your audience. So there are a lot of lessons that can be learned from the public sector, from the private sector in the public sector. But yeah, it all starts from strategy, from being assertive. We don't have anything to explain. You don't see the American army or the American government out there explaining, well, we're sorry, we would have, we should have. And it's a huge, huge problem because, again, it goes up to the operational level. I'll give you a prime example, which is this notion of genocide. So in the first days of the war, obviously Israel was in shock. We didn't know what tomorrow would bring, and we didn't know if we would have a tomorrow. And I don't say that as Israel, I say that as the Jewish people, because I'm a firm believer that if, God forbid, Israel goes down, the Jewish people goes down. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu feels the same way, as did his father. So we, in the first few days of the war, first few weeks of the war, were fighting back. We didn't know what would happen. Meanwhile, the pro-Palestinian world already had a strategy in their drawer. And that strategy was using the word genocide. It didn't matter if it fit. They were going to hammer that home. They used to say occupation, occupation, occupation. Well, we moved the Jews out of Gaza in 2005, so they couldn't really use that so effectively. So genocide was their buzzword, and they hammered it home. Now, why is that important? Well, it's very important because what was perpetrated on the Jewish people on October 7th was a genocide. Definition, genocide. They came in, they plowed through our borders, they killed men in front of their children, parents in front of their children, they beheaded, they maimed, they murdered, they raped, they burnt people alive with the intent of killing every last Jew in Israel if they could. Not only was that their intent, it's clearly written in the Hamas charter. We know that's what they want. They want to perpetrate genocide against Jews in Israel and then on Jews abroad. So there's your genocide right there smacking you in the face. Now, for whatever reason, And I'll put my hands up here too. We didn't go out from day one saying what was perpetrated against us was a genocide. They took those words, they pushed those words to the world. And then lo and behold, those same words, those same false and absurd allegations find their way in the courts in The Hague. And now, all of our top brass, our prime minister, etc., have to be concerned about ICC. I mean, it's a little bit absurd. And it all started from communications. So that people need to understand what the American army understands and what other major armies understand around the world, which is that the two go together. There's the operational activity, there's military activity, and there's the communication strategy. I can give you more examples of that, but that's a strong one.
Wow, that is very powerful. If we had more time, I would want to just hear story after story, but I know your time is very precious. So let me just ask you, you shared what you were doing for the IDF and for the state of Israel, but now let's kind of pivot into IDSF. You've had tremendous success. Maybe you can share some of that with us. We always have viewers who are asking, are we penetrating the mainstream international media? So what would your response be to that?
So I can tell you that my relationship with IDSF, Abitonistim, started at the embryonic time, like just after Amir had founded the organization. I worked with him for some time, and then I was brought back more recently. And I can tell you the growth of the organization, the reach of the organization, um, is immense. It has grown tremendously, and that goes hand in hand with the media. And I appreciate what you're saying that the numbers have definitely gone up in my monthly reports and things like that. We're getting into the top tier media on an almost daily basis. Um, One of my focuses has been to get Amir and the other generals and top brass of IDSF on TV. It's happening. It's happening all the time. If it's Fox, if it's BBC, CNN, etc. And I'll tell you something specifically about Amir, because I've said a lot of, I wouldn't say bad things, but not great things about Israeli public relations and things like that. Amir has a unique gift in that he is a senior ranking former general. So he's got the former, he's got the credentials, his English is tremendous, and he can communicate in a very clear and concise way as if he's talking to anyone. So whether it's a child listening or a seasoned diplomat or general elsewhere, they get it. He's very clear and to the point. That is extremely rare. So you can say that I'm doing a good job. I'll say he's doing a good job too, in so much as he is very sought after. He's very ready and open to deliver up to date, not messages from anyone, but the reality on the ground, what's actually happening, what needs to happen, the big strategy, the big picture, whether it's big picture Middle East or big picture global. So a lot of the success goes down to Amir, and I'm just happy to have the ability to connect the dots and make the relationships.
Fantastic. Anything else you want to add? Anything you want to send out to the viewers who are going to watch this?
So obviously, I want to thank everyone for their support of IDSF. If there's one thing that we learned on October 7th, it's that trying the same things again and again and again don't necessarily work. And when people like Amir, came on the scene a number of years ago and said, we need to rethink the big picture. We need to look at the army and the influences that have infiltrated the way that people think, the way that people are advanced in the army, etc. We need to look at that. People didn't fully understand or grasp what he was talking about. When October 7th happened and everything was flipped from the inside outside, everyone was like, those Bitronistim, the IDSF, they were onto something. And I think in the coming weeks or months, and definitely after this war, firstly, IDSF has been, very closely advising throughout the war on a operational level for sure. You see the work and the research and everything manifesting in action on the battlefield. But I think after the war, there's going to be a lot of movement and a lot of people asking a lot of questions as to what happened on October 7th and how we can stop that. And the most prepared and ready organization to face those challenges, in my mind, is IDSF, to make that policy action and to defend Israel for generations to come.
That was Avi Hyman, who is a tremendous PR expert here in Israel and works very hard to advance IDSF's international media strategy. So I hope that was an interesting insight into a little bit more what we do at IDSF and how the media really plays out here during this war. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. We will be on location tomorrow with IDF soldiers as they light the Hanukkah candles. So please make sure to tune into tomorrow's briefing. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.